I always tell myself, like, okay, today is a bad day. Let's acknowledge it. Let's sit in it for a little bit, order some yummy takeout, eat a tub of ice cream, watch a fun movie, cry a little bit about your uncertainty and your anxiety. But at the end of the day, what can you do about it right now?
Welcome to the Injured Athletes Club podcast, the show that helps athletes cope with sports injuries and to bounce back stronger. I'm mental skills coach, Carrie Jackson. We're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us.
And I'm journalist Cindy Kuzma. This week, our guest is marathon runner and NF2 advocate, Leanna Scaglione. But before we get into the interview, we want to share a resource we have for you.
In case you have not joined us yet, we absolutely invite you to come over to our support group on Facebook, the Injured Athletes Club. It is an incredible community of athletes that show up for each other every single day. It's really remarkable. So people are there, you're surrounded by people that get it, that understand how challenging it is to be dealing with an injury and how upsetting it could be to not be able to do the sport you love and be missing your tribe. And it's just a really supportive, wonderful place to be able to ask questions, share the challenges that you're going through, share the wins that you're experiencing. So make sure you come over and check out the Injured Athletes Club Facebook support group.
Great. Thanks so much for that, Carrie. And a great big thank you to our exclusive sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. They are the creators of the Lever System, a portable lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. You'll learn a little bit more about them later in the episode, and you will also learn that you can use code INJURED20 for 20% off any device. And with that, let's get on to this week's show. As I mentioned, our guest is Leanna Scaglione. She was a ballet dancer in her childhood with the goal of becoming a professional when she was diagnosed with a condition called neurofibromatosis type 2. It's since been renamed NF2-related schwannomatosis. She was just a teenager when that happened, but she was able to return to dance, even though she didn't become a professional dancer. And she's now a marathon runner on a quest to become the first athlete with NF2 to run all the Abbott World Marathon majors. She just finished a year as the Children's Tumor Foundation National Ambassador and is also very active in advocacy and talking about NF2 on social media. She was recently appointed the Children's Tumor Foundation Junior Board co-chair as well. And as you can see from that, Carrie, one thing that I thought was pretty cool about Leanna's journey, she's had a lot of challenges, but she's really taken kind of a leadership role. And there's something about the way she has both advocated for herself and also helped other people with NF2 and related conditions advocate for themselves in a really complex medical system and in a condition that can be complicated, complex, is so full of treatment decisions and clinical trials and all of that. I really respected the way she has learned to do that for herself and also help other people do that. So there's a really good discussion and some really good advice about that in here. I know that's something that a lot of our injured athletes struggle with. Is certainly something I've struggled with as an injured athlete, how to make sure that I'm speaking up for myself in the doctor's office and getting the care that I really need.
Yeah, there were so many great gems from this particular episode. I really appreciated too, touching on the challenges of having an invisible injury or an invisible diagnosis. And also I really appreciated her talking about the grief that she did go through and really, and in particular mentioning that when we think about the stages of grief, that it's not a linear process. So I think that's really important to understand. And I liked that she touched on that, on the fact that it's not a linear process. And also that she talked about how she's used writing and journaling and storytelling as part of her coping skills. And I'm a very big believer in that. So I really appreciated that she talked about that as well. And just her recognition of really having to come to a place where she had to surrender to what her body needed and what it meant to redefine success and to be able to embrace small wins. So there's a lot of wonderful things in this episode that you're about to hear.
Yeah. And Leanna is also a great follow on social media. So we'll have her link to her Instagram in the show notes, and you should definitely check her out there. Here is our interview with Leanna. Leanna, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us on the Injured Athletes Club.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So we have a saying around here, which is, we're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us. And we know that injury and illness and everything that goes along with that as an athlete can be a roller coaster with a lot of ups and downs along the way. So when we ask this question, we really mean it. Leanna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Although I think if you asked me that a couple days ago, I would have said very anxious because I actually just had a consultation with a neurosurgeon to take a look at the tumor in my lower spine to have that removed and get that all scheduled and sorted. But thankfully that meeting went really great. He reassured me on everything. So I feel really confident with the surgeon and I'm calmer.
That's nice. It makes sense, right? Feeling a little anxious going into a meeting like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know we'll talk more about your NF2 and kind of go back to the beginning on that. But yeah, I wanted to touch on that a little bit first because I know you're kind of balancing that with also training for the Tokyo Marathon in March, right?
Yes.
So I guess let's start by just talking about how your training is going and then also how that's kind of interacting with some of the symptoms of that tumor right now and how you're having to adjust to accommodate all that.
So training has been going a little bit slower than what I would say any marathon training should look like according to Google and training. But Google and training doesn't factor in life and what happens when it gets in the way. And so for me, I'm trying to approach this a little bit more strategically with my health involved than I have in the past, even when I have other health issues that popped up. Because of the tumor pain that I have been experiencing, my longer runs get a little bit more difficult because it starts to get aggravated. It's right there in the lower spine and it sits where the sciatic nerve kind of gets aggravated. So the longer the run, the more pain I start to experience. So this time around for training, I'm really focusing on strength training and making sure I'm doing more of that so that I can support myself within my core and within my legs. So that way, yes, I'll be in pain at some point, but I know my body can carry me over that finish line still.
You totally answered the question I had. Like, oh, does that change your training at all? Like, your training look a little different than the past training cycles that you've been through for a marathon? It sounds like it has changed a bit.
Yeah, it's definitely changed a bit. Like this is marathon number 7 for me in my life. So I know my body can do that distance. It can go that far. And I know my limitations and what hurts when. So it's just preparing myself and giving myself the best foundation this time around for this situation because each marathon's different regardless. It's different elevations, different roads, and all the variables. So you always want to go in with your best foot forward.
Right. But it seems like something you've been able to do along the way. And again, we'll talk about kind of your progression through running, but it seems like you've been able to consciously adjust your goals for the situation that you've been into. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, first of all, because I think that that's something that a lot of athletes have a hard time with. When things aren't optimal, how do you have a realistic goal that's, exciting, but still like achievable for yourself?
I think it goes back to when I was first training for the New York City Marathon for the very first time in 2023. It was my first marathon ever, and I happened to have been on a experimental drug trial. And those side effects threw my body for a loop, and my long runs were sometimes cut short and things like that. And I remember one day, I think it was my mom, where I called her and she was like, "How'd the run go?" And I was like, "Oh, I went out for like 12 miles and I only made it to 6. And she's like, "Did you just say you only ran 6 miles?"
Yeah.
No, just casually running 6 miles. Like, that's not a casual thing. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, you know what? You're right. That is still a win because I still ran 6 miles on this treatment. And so I started to look at the small wins as positive. So that way I didn't get stuck on the failure of not completing the longest run that I wanted to. It's like, look what I did.
Yes. I love that so much, that like a allowing yourself to have that psychological flexibility of like, you know what, we need to rethink what it means to be successful right now in this moment, and that you're able to adapt and adjust. Because with my injured athletes, it's one of the biggest challenges is how do I set long-term goals when there's so many factors that are unknown and things that are out of my control, and that having grace and being willing to have that psychological flexibility and be able to adjust is so huge for that process.
Yeah. And then of course with like your first marathon, I know for a lot of athletes, like your main goal is finishing. Like, no, it's going to be a personal best regardless, because it's the first time you're running that distance. So yay. Be happy for that. So for me, it's just like, okay, but this is your version of finishing. You know, you're not a professional athlete. And I just had to keep convincing myself that it's like, it's okay. You're doing what you can. Like, this is what you got. Go for it.
Right. And we know that this isn't the first time you've had to adjust to accommodate your new situation. So can you take us back to when you were first diagnosed with neurofibromatosis? I know you were dancing ballet with dreams of becoming a professional dancer, right?
Yeah, I was in the thick of training. We were deep into Nutcracker season. And I remember the pain that I was feeling, which, mind you, I've been experiencing the type of pain that I was for over a year. I thought it was an injury. And I was just trying to power through it and hoping that it would get better over time. But it got to a point where I was like, this isn't getting better. And it was my hip and my right quad. I couldn't lift my leg. So obviously as a ballerina, that's not something you want. And so I went to a sports orthopedist, and they're like, oh, you probably have some tendonitis in your hip that's really aggravated, and maybe some micro tears because you've been dealing with it for so long. Go to PT. Well, it kept getting worse, the pain. And he's like, well, at this point, the only thing I can suggest is an MRI. And the MRI of my hip actually revealed a tumor in my lower spine. It was so big that it appeared in the upper corner in the scan. And they called immediately for me to come back and schedule a full spinal MRI of that. And it just was this life-shattering moment for me. And I just, I'm a teenager. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. As far as I was concerned, like, my life was planned out for me for like the next 15, 20 years. And now I have to pivot, and I didn't handle it well.
And how could you, right? Like, that was the last thing you were expecting to see on the MRI, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I did not handle it well. I went completely numb. I was depressed. I ignored it. That the tumor ended up being the size of a grapefruit. And it took 2 surgeries to remove. And unfortunately, by the end of the second surgery, I woke up with my right leg completely numb, and I lost all sensation. The muscles, they still activated, but because of the sensation, like my leg, for something between the brain and the leg, didn't quite translate on how to move it properly. Yeah. And so unfortunately, I was in a wheelchair, unable to walk for about a year. And it was just like, what do I do now?
And how old again were you at the time? I know you were a teenager, but
16.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So you went from there to like basically having to physically relearn how to walk. So how did you do that, both like sort of mentally and physically?
That I say comes from stubbornness and anger.
Which sometimes serves us well.
In that time, it did. I was like, are you kidding me? I have to sit in this wheelchair, unable to walk after dancing for like 40 hours a week, year round? No. What? No. And so in school, they got mad at me because I would refuse to use the wheelchair. And they're like, you got to stay in the wheelchair because liability, like they can't have me fall and get injured, which I understood. But anytime that I was home, I tried to just shuffle my way and hold on to the walls to the bathroom the best I could. I would just do laps around the kitchen table, like holding on to the backs of the chairs. My mom really pushed me to keep going. She took me up and down the driveway. She really encouraged the process for me getting back at it. And I think that really helped it along the way too.
So then when did you find out? I mean, you knew this tumor, and I guess we should say it was not cancerous, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So when
Thankfully.
did you find out that it wasn't just the one tumor, that you actually had a condition that predisposed you to this? And then could you tell us a little bit more about neurofibromatosis and type 2, since I think probably a lot of our listeners won't be familiar?
Probably not. So I figured out that it was more than just this one-off instant between the two surgeries of that first initial tumor. I had a follow-up MRI and it revealed that there was a second tumor there. The first one was so big it blocked it. And I was very lucky enough to have a really great neurosurgeon at that time. We still keep in touch. He's that amazing. And he looked at my mom and I and he's like, this isn't a coincidence anymore. This can't be just a one-off if there's a second tumor here. And thankfully he was familiar with NF and all the different types. And he's like, we're going to get you tested, and get you also a brain scan, because based on my age, he had an inkling that it was type 2. And the thing with type 2 is you probably have brain tumors as well. And it's the bilateral vestibular schwannomas, which grow off of the vestibular nerve right behind the ears. And lo and behold, I had that, and genetic testing came back positive that I had neurofibromatosis type 2, which, for listeners who don't know, it's a rare condition that causes tumors to grow along the nervous system. It is genetic, but it is possible to be a spontaneous mutation, which is what I am.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, combined with everything else, you were dealing with so much, having surgery, relearning to walk, getting that diagnosis, and really shifting your mindset about like what your life was going to be like. I mean, how did you cope with all that at such a young age?
Honestly, I don't think I did until I was older, because once I started to relearn to walk again and everything, I first went on a mission to remove every possible tumor that I was able to find in my body, because in my head, that was the cure. Unfortunately, there is no cure for NF for any of the types just yet. Research is moving forward, thankfully, where it seems like we're close, fingers crossed. But at that time, no. And when my neurosurgeon realized what I was trying to do, he's like, you got to stop. Like, this isn't the solution. This isn't going to solve your problem. And so when I finally calmed down on that and everything, I realized how invisible my diagnosis was. And so even though I did have the brain tumors, I still have one, they were very small, very slow growing. And so I really only had to get an MRI once a year to monitor everything, including my spine. So for me, I could turn my do off from it and I didn't have to acknowledge it. And so I just ignored it, which worked in my favor in the long run, but not a great way to cope also. Because for me, as I got older and my senior year of college, when it really hit hard, I learned that there has to be a balance between acknowledging your diagnosis, but also living your life. And ignoring it for as long as I did made me realize my life actually was still livable. You know, I made it this far living my life as normal. Why does it have to change when I acknowledge my diagnosis?
I love that progression. And that's one of the things we talk about in our rebound coaching groups is the different styles of coping and avoidance coping, right? Like, you know what? I'm going to ignore this for a little bit and give myself a break. Like, it's very effective in the short term, right? And so I love that you kind of recognize like, this is what I need right now. And then like, oh, okay, I need a different coping style. And that you were able to look at like, wait a minute, is it possible to be able to acknowledge this and still live my life at the same time? Yeah. What kind of support did you have during that period when you were in college and like all of this was coming up for you?
My mom was the number one support. She always is. She still is to this day. But I think the biggest turnaround for me was in my senior year, for thesis, I majored in creative writing. And so rather than your typical research paper, we got to choose to write a creative piece. And of my college friends who knew of my situation, they're like, oh my gosh, your story's so inspiring. Like, even with all of that. And I just, unfortunately, because I ignored it for so long, I just had this like weird scripted telling of what happened to me. And that's how I was writing. And my college professor was like, no, this isn't relatable. Like, it's a great story. Like, it's like, but you're not making it you. Like, this sounds very rehearsed. And double-edged sword, it actually is what forced me to acknowledge my diagnosis. Wow. And I ended up in group therapy because of it. And I was just journaling the entire time. And my journaling became my thesis.
Oh wow. Brilliant.
And yep.
Wow. Oh.
And so I always use that type of storytelling as my coping mechanism as well, because it just, it helps you just vent. And it's on paper. It's not you yelling at someone or getting angry at someone. It's your journal. It's not going to take offense. Maybe the page might rip because you pressed the pen too hard, but it's fine. It'll survive.
That's right. Its feelings won't be hurt.
Exactly.
Wow, that's so fascinating because, I did want to ask too more about like movement being a part of your processing too, but obviously you had this like very, verbal and intellectual and like creative response in that way too. So how fascinating that there were so many pieces of that puzzle to you and accepting what was happening and figuring out how your life was going to flow from there.
Yeah, it was a really great time in my life, and I'm very proud of myself for admitting the help that I needed and taking advantage of the help and the support I got.
Yeah. Well, we talked about you learning to walk again, and then you also danced again too, right? And including in college. So what did that add to like kind of your whole process, and what did that feel like to be able to do that after being unsure if that was something that was going to be a part of your life?
So the dancing in college, until I had that pivotal moment in my life, I always was trying to like refigure out how to make the dance career work. So I switched styles. I switched to a more modern contemporary dance where it allowed more forgiveness in my movement. And, the nerve damage could be used in my favor sometimes. And like, it really kind of helped with that. But then one year I did all the dance classes I possibly could on top of doing the musical in the spring. And it just so happened to be the second drug trial that I was on. And my body just kind of was like, you're doing too much. And it hinted to me that a dance career would be too much on my body because of how many rehearsals you're having a day. The physical requirements are just too much, which kind of feels ironic as a marathon runner now.
I was thinking the same thing. That's the exact thought that went through my head. And then she chose marathon.
I think because I don't have to run if I don't want to.
That's right. Yeah,
that's what it is.
That's true. Yes.
It's not your primary career, but
exactly.
Yeah. But that's really interesting. Then did you feel like you kind of had to go through a second almost grieving period for that once you kind of figured that out?
I did have to go through that second grieving period to be like, okay, you just got to accept it and let it go. Let's try doing it for fun. And I tried doing it for fun. I really did. I really tried. I even switched into musical theater, which I really loved. But when it came time after graduation and my mom's like, let's go on some auditions. She really was encouraging me. Getting the first couple no's as a response for auditions, which cause it's such a tough industry. Credit to those who can power through all of that. I realized I couldn't do it because I faced one of the biggest no's in my life that I possibly could have faced with a tumor. And to have someone else control that part of my life, I was like, no, I'm good. Like, I want to take more control over that, yes, and not leave it in someone else's hands. Like, I already, no, I'm good. So as much as I love it and it always brought me joy, part of me just can never do it without training for something.
Right. So then it does kind of make sense that you would choose something else that is active, but that you do have more control over, that's more personal to you. So tell us like when and how running became a part of your life.
Running was an accident. It was during the pandemic, and I was, getting really tired of doing the at-home workouts in my living room. And it was spring, which is like perfect weather to be outside. And I was like, I'm here in New York City. I have Central Park. Social distancing is possible. Let me go take a walk. And I was walking and I was like, you know what? Let's try some running. Let's see what happens. And I wasn't really paying attention, but I knew certain checkpoints were a full mile. Like, I didn't have a smartwatch at the time. So I didn't have like anything measuring me exactly. And that's when I realized, I was like, wait a minute. That checkpoint from where I started to here, that's a full mile. I just ran a mile. Wait a minute. And then I ran back and I was like, oh my gosh, I ran another mile. And I was really excited. And I called up my mom, told her I ran a mile. And she's like, so I guess you're a runner now? And I'm like, I guess so. Let's see what happens. Long story short, I'm a runner now.
Yeah. And what happened next? What motivated you to keep going and to sign up for half marathons and everything else that you've done since?
My mom reminded me that running is in my blood. My dad is a marathoner. And she also reminded me about New York Roadrunners hosting races in Central Park. And so I kind of was like, let me get more confident with the running. Let me see what's going on. And eventually I was able to run 4 miles straight without stopping. And I was so proud of myself. And I was like, I'm going to sign up for my race, see what it's all about. And I signed up for my very first race. It was a quick little 4-mile race in Central Park. So I was like, okay, I'm familiar with these hills, this road. Let me see what's going on. Showed up all alone, didn't know anyone, but I still had so much fun. That energy is just so infectious. And as people say, I drank the Kool-Aid. And I just continued and I started going farther and farther. And then I got the email because I signed up for the membership for New York Roadrunners. And so they do the email blast when the big signups happen for their races. And they announced the New York City half lottery. And I was like, I don't know. I've never really run more than like 5 miles, but like, how much further is a half marathon? Let's be realistic. I can probably do it. And so there happened to have been like a 15K in between before the sign up date for the lottery. And I was like, if I can complete this 15K, I can totally run a half marathon. And I told my dad, and he was so excited to hear that. He's like, okay, this is what you need to do for the training. This is your drinking routine. And he became my run coach from that day forward. and that was it. And then I ran my first half marathon and I realized this really brought me joy.
That's amazing. And as someone who has drank the Kool-Aid myself, I can completely relate to so much of that. And I love that you had such a good experience in your first race too. That is like excellent to hear. Can you run more mileage without getting hurt? Return to running sooner after an injury.
Keep your fitness even when you're facing a setback? Or get to the start line healthy and faster? If you ask our friends at Lever Movement, you just might find the answer to all of these questions is a resounding yes. We are thrilled to welcome Lever Movement back as our sponsor for season 9 of the Injured Athletes Club podcast. And if all that sounds good, they have an offer that makes it easier than ever for you to try the Lever system for yourself. In case you haven't heard about it yet, the lever system is a portable, lightweight device that attaches to a treadmill to reduce your body weight. This is very good news for all of us athletes because it means less impact on the joints, so we can come back from injury safely or even prevent getting hurt in the first place. And the best part is that it's portable. That means you can use it at home or even take it to the gym and set it up in less than 2 minutes.
Elite athletes like marathoner Sarah Hall and Jess Lehrmanth, an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon, have used lever in their training and rehab routines. And we know, so have many of you in the Injured Athletes Club. If you'd like to check out the lever system for yourself, use the discount code INJURED20 to get 20% off any device. And stay tuned here on the podcast and in the Facebook group for the Injured Athletes Club this season. We'll have more exciting updates from our partnership. We have some fun plans in the works with Lever we know you're going to want to check out. I know that then after you started running, I think it was 2022, if I have that right, you got some news about your NF2 that kind of changed everything. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that shift and kind of how it's both affected your life and your running.
Yeah. So actually this half marathon, that first one that I was signed up for, beginning of 2022, I got the news that my right vestibular schwannoma needed action. It was no longer what they call a watch and wait. It was doubling in size every 6 months. Yeah. And I was kind of waiting to hear back from my doctor who oversaw my treatment about possible drug trials. There was one that was taking applicants, but there was also another one coming down the pipeline that he really wanted me to try instead. And so it was kind of just a waiting game to see if it was approved to begin yet. And so I was just like, okay, this is now going to be my life. It is changing. It is definitely being different. I'm no longer this watch and wait patient. Where do I go from here? And my mom's like, just do what you always do. Just keep going. Focus on your half marathon, you know? And during that half marathon, I saw a runner up ahead of me at mile 3 wearing a blue shirt with a white square that said end NF on the back.
Oh.
And I started crying because for me, like up until this point, like I was alone in my journey. Like I didn't want to connect with anyone because I didn't feel like anyone could really relate to me. And so and it's a rare condition as well. So seeing a random person running in your race with you, with it on the back of their shirt, I was like, this isn't just a random letter on their back. Like I know exactly what they're talking about. And I started crying and I tried to catch up, but I realized like I would just be depleting myself and ruining my whole plan for the race and not make it. I would hit the wall if I kept trying to catch them. So I gave up on trying to catch them and I was like, maybe I'll find them after the race. If I don't, it's fine. And I remember I told my mom afterwards when I finished, I was like, you'll never guess what I saw. And then she's like, they were probably running for Children's Tumor Foundation. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you know, their offices are here in New York City. They might have an endurance team. You know, there is a thing called charity runners. And I was like, that's true. And I looked them up and lo and behold, they were running for Children's Tumor Foundation. And I wanted to run the New York City Marathon with Children's Tumor Foundation. And because of that, and give myself that support system. But coincidentally, when sign-up time was ready for the New York City Marathon for charity runners, is when I found out that I was going to start this trial for treatment. And I realized with math-wise, I was like, I'm going to just be starting this trial right around the time that the New York City Marathon starts. Like, let's not do that to ourselves for your first marathon. Like, let's give ourselves a break. And so instead I waited, and signed up for the 2023 New York City Half Marathon with them instead, which thankfully I did wait because coincidentally the weekend of the New York City Marathon was my start date for the trial.
Oh.
So kismet.
Yeah.
It worked out. But I remember we did a team run for the half. And I remember just meeting everyone. We all went around and we shared our connection. And that was the last time we spoke about NF and its diagnosis and everything. And instead we just talked about music, what other races we've done. And I was like, oh my gosh, I found my people.
Yes. Yeah. I was wondering if that's what it felt like when you saw that shirt, because it reminds me of the work I've done with athletes with type 1 diabetes, where it feels so different when you're with someone that gets it. And so I was imagining you seeing that shirt and seeing NF. Is that the feeling it had, like the emotional response you had? Is that the feeling it had in that moment? It was like, I don't even need to, like, even without meeting that person, but seeing that shirt, suddenly I feel seen. Like, tell us a little bit more about that emotional response.
It was, I don't want to say it was like, it's weird to say, it was almost like falling in love. It's like you had like that physical feeling in your heart where it just kind of like started to tighten and you realize like, oh, like I'm being seen by this person. And even though it was their back to me, like I knew they were looking at me. And showing up to this team run and going through the team Zooms and everything, because the charity team is run by such an amazing woman at Children's Tumor Foundation, Lydia Vanderloo. Gonna give her a shout out. I have to. She hosts Zoom meetings once a month to prepare everyone for all of the races. And it's just so wonderful that she does it. And it just, you truly feel like you're part of a family with this team. Mm-hmm. And they reached out to me as well with it. They're like, are you open to going on the news by chance? Because I was also starting to share my story on Instagram at this point as well. And they're like, well, she's clearly comfortable talking. Maybe we can get her in front of a news station. And I was like, yeah, I want to start talking about this. I want to share it more. I want people to know and have that same feeling that I had and know that they're not alone. Mm-hmm. And that was it.
Yeah. And now there's somebody else that has that same experience you had with that runner, but they're having it with you because they're hearing your story and feeling like, oh, I'm not alone. And there are people that understand what I'm going through and that get it. I think that community is one of the most powerful things. Then we see it with our Injured Athletes Club support group too, that we have on Facebook, where it's like, oh, I'm immersed with other people that understand what I'm going through and what it means and how challenging this is, and how I also want to just talk about training, right? That you can have like, oh, everybody understands me. And now we can just talk about life because you're both and, right? Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible.
And it's really interesting to think about like the impact on your identity through all of that too, because it almost sounds like we were just doing another interview the other day with an amputee athlete, and she was talking about kind of her disability identity and how for years she didn't really have one. And then when she started doing adaptive sports, para sports, like that was kind of when she stepped into that and it became more a part of her, and she was more open to talking about it. And so it almost sounds like all of those things were like kind of happening at a confluence for you too, where you were stepping into that role of claiming what was true for you and also being open to sharing it while you were also doing all these other incredible things through the running.
Yeah. It's interesting because like, this is a weird time. Like somehow during the pandemic, like the world became okay with people oversharing on the internet. And so I was like, someone's going to care about this and listen to me, whether, I use it as like a video diary for myself and I get 2 followers or 10,000 followers. I don't care. Like, as long as it's reaching someone that needs to hear it and know that they're not alone. And it just, everything kept lining up and seeming to be right. And it brought me joy to show people that their life doesn't stop when they get a diagnosis like this.
Right. And I really appreciate how you share so many of the challenges that Just are things that you kind of have to even just figure out with your running, like whether that's something big, like some of the side effects with your heart rate, or something more small, like irritation in your eye. So yeah, can you talk a little bit more about both some of the complications that you've had and how you've kind of navigated those in your running, and also like what it is like to kind of share that with people and what the response has felt like to you?
Yeah. So with the first training for my first marathon, being on that drug trial, like I just always had to make sure like my nutrition was top notch because my body was already depleted before even I started running. And so I had to make sure that like I was eating something before I started my running, eating something during my runs, and just accepting that I needed to listen to my body to not injure it because I was more susceptible to these injuries. And just making sure that like I was being good and I was overhydrating compared to what someone else might consider normal. But it was what my body needed, and making sure that I was fulfilling those needs. Now, after I had my right vestibular schwannoma removed and I had my brain surgery in 2024, I had some balance affected by it. And so I had to figure out like, okay, how do I avoid running into everyone? And on top of it, I have facial paralysis now, and my right eye is stuck open. And my sunglasses are not doing the trick on blocking the wind. So I had to switch up what type of sunglasses I wore. I figured out that if I tilted my head a certain way, it actually steered my body back on track.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
And I stayed to the side for my own safety, because I'm also deaf in my right ear now too. So it's like, okay, if I stay all the way to the right, it forces people to pass on my left.
Right. Yeah. That's smart.
And I don't have to worry about being startled or anything like that.
Yeah, so many like little things. I mean, I think every runner does have like these things that come up that you just kind of have to figure out along the way. But I know that you're dealing with kind of an extra layer of those things, I would say. And I know you ran the New York City, you mentioned your brain surgery. And I know when you ran the New York City Marathon that year, it was what, 2 months after your brain surgery? Is that right?
So the New York City half marathon.
Half marathon, right.
I did the half marathon 2 months afterwards. And that was intentional. That was not an accident. Registration for that race happened after I had my surgery scheduled. And I was like, I'm going to be fine. I felt like a bobblehead. It was not fine. But I knew it was something that I had to do because this tumor, this brain surgery, it was equally as big as my first surgery that I ever had in my eyes. And I didn't want to let another tumor take my life and control it and tell me what it was going to be moving forward. And so completing that half marathon and finishing it, no matter how long it took me, was me saying my life was still possible. Running was still a thing.
I love that. So kind of on the flip side of that, I guess, too, how does running affect your choices about treatment? Because I know you have had a lot of decisions to make along the way. And it seems like you've been able to like make at least some of them with your running in mind and trying to, preserve your ability to do what you want to do when you want to do it. So yeah, talk a little bit about kind of how all of that factors in.
Yeah, that's actually a really fun question right now, especially with the timing of my life.
Yeah.
My tumor in my lower spine, it's needed surgery for quite some time now, but I have been putting it off because of all the marathons that I've been running and doing and completing. And so I told myself, I'm going to run Tokyo first.
Okay.
And, the last one that I need to run really that is kind of difficult for entry is Boston. Because as runners know, Boston is one of the hardest to get into because you have to time qualify or do a charity team and raise like tens to thousands of dollars. And unfortunately, Children's Tumor Foundation doesn't have a charity team for Boston yet. They have one for all of the other majors, including Sydney. So I know I have an entry for them and everything, but I realized I was like, okay, if I plan this out, I run New York City here, and then I do Tokyo, and I do surgery after Tokyo, I'll still be okay to potentially do Boston or Sydney. I mathed it out, and I took it into consideration. And I, unfortunately, this past New York City marathon, kind of proved to me that I needed to fit in surgery before I did take on Boston and Sydney. It was very painful, that last 10K. And I was like, all right, let me do Tokyo first, though. I'm not messing up Tokyo. We'll go from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I love that you were able to do that you were able to say, this is a priority for me, and I'm going to make decisions with that in mind. Like that. Yeah. Yeah. But that is all, I think, probably pretty mentally challenging to work through all that. And we know running is mentally challenging in and of itself in the first place. So how do you kind of work to stay motivated and positive when you're training and racing, especially when things aren't going exactly the way you planned?
I think it goes back to what happened when I woke up from brain surgery with facial paralysis. I learned the big lesson of focus on what you can control and not what you can't. Because as angry as I was that I had facial paralysis, because I did ask the surgeons, like, please don't. I know it's a risk. Please don't. And unfortunately, I did get some. And I realized, I was like, as angry as I am, my anger is not going to fix my face.
Yeah.
It's not going to fix it. And what can I do to fix it? And that is facial reanimation surgery, which is what I did, which is why my face is able to move the way that it does now. But I kind of took that motto with me with everything else. And I took that into my running and into my training. And it's like, what can I control? Okay, I'm not feeling great, so take it a shorter run, you know? And then take the small wins. And I just continued those mottos and always trying to make it a positive run, even if it ends negatively.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think also helps, I feel like Carrie says this all the time, that humans are really bad at uncertainty and coping with that. And again, we're all dealing with a lot of that, and you're probably dealing with more of that than most of us. And it sounds like that is also been a really effective strategy for you in coping with that kind of uncertainty. Is there anything else that comes to mind when you think about like uncertainty and what that's like for you and how you do navigate that?
I always tell myself, you have to acknowledge the uncertainty. You have to acknowledge those emotions. Otherwise, they're just going to sit and fester and eventually bubble over and most likely explode in the worst way possible. And so I always tell myself, like, okay, today is a bad day. Let's acknowledge it. Let's sit in it for a little bit. Order some yummy takeout, eat a tub of ice cream, watch a fun movie, cry a little bit about your uncertainty and your anxiety. But at the end of the day, what can you do about it right now? Not much? Okay, that's fine. We can deal with it when the time comes. We can look at what we can do to fix it, and let's get moving again. And just keep moving forward, because if you get stuck in that sadness, it's also not good as well.
I feel like you totally embrace one of the things we talk about in our book Rebound, which is if you want to go far in your recovery, FAR is an acronym for you have to feel, accept, recover. And you've done such an incredible job of that. Of like, all right, I got to feel my feelings and allow myself to feel this, and then accept okay, this is happening. So now what do I want to do? What's in my control and how can I adjust? And I mean, it's just evidenced by how you were sharing, well, my equilibrium's different now. Okay. So how do I deal with that? And what, maybe I go to the side. Oh, I can't hear in this ear. Okay. So I'm going to go to this side so that okay, so what can I do and how do I adjust? And that you're absolutely right. Like, it's so critical to feel your feelings and know, how do we move through that? How do we allow ourselves to give yourself that moment to be like, yep, I'm super bummed and I'm going to take care of myself. And then I'm going to regroup and recover and go, okay, now what? So what do I want to do now with this new information and this new reality?
Yeah. And I also, through my years of trying to find the balance of continuing to live my life and acknowledging my diagnosis and accepting it fully, it's very much like the 5 stages of grief. And the thing with the 5 stages of grief that kind of gets forgotten is that you can go back a step.
Yes.
You don't have to go in that order.
It's not linear. Exactly.
It's not linear. You can go back a step. You can skip a couple steps.
Yep.
It's all jumbled. And so you gotta just forgive yourself sometimes that it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that, because the other thing I'll see people too is like, okay, well, I went through the stages and now I'm sad again. What the hell's going on with that? Like, no, that's not how it works. Yeah. You don't graduate. Like, sometimes, grief comes back.
You go back a step sometimes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, something else I wanted to touch on too. I know you've had to become an advocate for yourself a lot of times in treatment, and even in treatment, there are times when things that don't go the way they're supposed to, whether it is the facial paralysis or when doctors forget to scan your brain, or ER doctors don't know what NF is. And I think, speaking up can be really difficult in our medical system. So I'm curious how you've learned to do that, and if you have advice for other people on advocating for yourself in those situations.
Yeah. You got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable conversation.
Absolutely.
And realizing that a lot of times, like, the doctors, they can't read your mind. Like, when it came to the facial reanimation surgery, like, I was very persistent about, what can we do to fix this? This is not okay. Like, I'm talking like 1 month after surgery. Like, even when I was going for my follow-up appointments, I was repeatedly saying, this is not okay. What can we do? And my doctor admitted, like, he was really hopeful that something would come back naturally. And at that 6-month mark, I was like, actually, it was at the 4-month mark. Yeah, no, it was at the 4-month mark. I'm like, I'm not waiting for natural. We need to fix this. What can we do? And he's like, there's facial reanimation surgery. And honestly, I don't think he would have mentioned it if I wasn't so persistent.
Yeah.
And so I encourage doctors and patients alike that no one's a mind reader. So doctors, just because we didn't ask doesn't mean we don't want to know. And patients, you got to ask because they don't know you want to know.
Yes. Oh my God. I love this conversation so much, right? Because I had a physician, the way he said it one time, it just really struck me, where it was like, if you come in and you don't have an agenda, you're going to be subjected to my agenda. And that might not be the helpful thing in that moment. So you are a part of your treatment team. Like, you have to come in, and they can't be inside your body. They can't feel what you're feeling. They can't read your mind, to your point. Yep. So it's okay to speak up. I think sometimes, we just forget that, like, it's okay to speak up for yourself and to ask questions, and to, like, it's okay to be uncomfortable and do it anyway. Like, because you need to advocate for yourself, and it's okay to do that.
Yeah, I remember I had a fellow patient reach out to me on Instagram. She found me because, we always Google things and whatnot. And she was going to have one of her vestibular schwannomas removed as well. And she kept in touch with me throughout her entire recovery process. And she still does to this day. It's actually really cute. I appreciate a lot of the people who reach out to me. And I always, when I message them back, they're like, you responded. I'm like, of course I did. But I remember it was like the first week or so after she got home. And she's like, I'm really concerned about this. I'm like, well, did you reach out to the surgeon? And it coincidentally was the same surgeon as me. And she's like, no, I haven't. I don't want to bother. I'm like, you're home. How is he going to know this is bothering you? Like, he wants to hear from you. She goes, I don't want to be annoying. I'm like, here's his email. Email him directly. She goes, what about like the patient portal, like on my chart where you, and I'm like, no, the random staff admins read that. He's not going to see it first. Here's his email. Please email him directly.
Yes.
Like, he wants to hear from you. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, because he called me on a Saturday because he was concerned when I reached out.
I love that, right? Like, I have so many of my athletes that do the same thing where they're like, they don't reach out because they're like, oh, I don't want to put them out. Like, no, you're not putting them out. That's their job. I just had to have this conversation with my mother. Oh my God, I'm not even going to go on that tangent, but like, had to go on, like, don't, okay, no, I can't go on that tangent because I will. I'll talk about that forever. But it's like, hey, it's okay. You're not putting anyone out, and you got to be honest about how you're feeling and what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, and I do love hearing that people are reaching out to you and keeping in touch with you, and you're able to both give and get that support. And we touched a little bit on kind of your sort of public presence and your time as an ambassador. Like, how do you think that that's shifted both what you feel you've been able to give back to the community, but also like kind of what you've gotten from all of that work?
So what I've gotten is just an immense amount of support. I have made some lifelong friendships through sharing my story. I have a pen pal out in Germany, because we both coincidentally had facial reanimation surgery 2 weeks apart.
Oh, wow.
And we still keep in touch. I have friends in California, Canada, different countries, like all around the world. I have different pen pals, and it's just so great. And every year, Children's Tumor Foundation has their NF Summit where all the patients gather to find out what's new and up and coming and go to these different conferences to like learn about self-advocacy, for example, is one of them. And they all get to connect. And I remember like there was one person I saw, like there was like a little reception, and he saw me across the room and he's like, hi, I don't know if you realize who I am. And I'm like, of course I know who you are. Like, he's like, but we only met on Facebook. And I'm like, I know. Aww. I still know who you are. Like, you have a picture. He's like, I'm here because of you. And it just like, it makes me feel so good. And like, I have to remind myself, like when I get caught up with judging my follower count and view count and comment count and being like, oh, that's actually really like, I don't have a lot of comments in comparison to like a lot of people. Like these likes are really small. But then I go to my direct messages and it's full. Mm-hmm. And I realize I'm like, these are patients. Not all of them want to advertise in a public comment. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the work that you're doing with the private messaging is so much more impactful than the number of comments that you're receiving on an actual video or the number of followers that you have. Like, this is where you're earning that reward.
I love that. Yeah, it's a highly engaged audience. Yes. To be sure. Well, Leanna, we're so grateful to you for sharing all of this with us. And we've talked a little bit about your goals for the future, but tell us a little bit more, if you're open to it, about what you are feeling and thinking about the surgery, how that's going to impact you, and then how you hope that your running will continue forward after that.
I'm nervous about the surgery. I'm not going to lie. This is a tumor that has had previous surgery done on it. It could not be fully removed back then because if so, I would have had drop foot in my right foot. Mm-hmm. And my original neurosurgeon was the guy who took care of that, and he made that call. He didn't want to do that to me. So I'm very thankful for that. And so when I met with this new surgeon, I had to be very clear that you cannot fully remove this tumor because of this. And he's like, well, don't worry, because you told me it had previous surgery on it. I don't want to fully remove it. So it did relieve some pressure, as well as the questions he asked me. I did appreciate him making sure that this really was the right decision, that I did follow through on all the steps to make sure I was taking care of this. Like, did I try all the treatments possible out there before going to surgery, because surgery these days are always seen as like a last resort. Mm-hmm. Because you never know what damage is going to be caused with this. So I'm a little bit nervous. I am a little bit nervous because, I can face sensation nerve being affected, and how will that affect my running? And things like that. And I think about it, and I've thought about it up ahead. I was like, does this mean I'll need a guide for, balance issues, which falls under the ataxia category for athletes with disability? P.S. Being deaf does not.
Interesting.
Yes, it does not, because as far as they're concerned, you can see where you're going.
Okay.
And so you can control things. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I looked very deep into it about what can qualify as an athlete with disability, because selfishly for Boston, they have different qualifications for those runners.
That's right.
That's great. So, I did look into that to find out what I could do to support myself to continue this running. And I'm open to having a guide runner. I think it would be really fun to actually have a guide runner. Yeah. I recently ran the London Marathon side by side with one of my closest friends, and it was the most fun I had in a marathon, because I was with someone the entire time. It was a struggle bus because of the heat, but it was so much fun to have someone there. So I feel like if I have a guide, it's like running with a friend. It's just making sure things are going to continue and supporting myself the way that I know I need to support, and figuring out what I can control to keep my life going.
Yeah. Well, again, you've been so successful in doing that, and we can only hope that that you can continue, and that your running journey will continue to be there for you into the future. So Leanna, we can't thank you enough for sharing all this with us. And I know people are going to get so much out of this and are really going to appreciate your story. If you had to give a few other key pieces of advice to athletes coping with something like a chronic illness generally, or maybe even NF specifically, what would you tell them?
It's okay. It's okay, whatever you're feeling, whether it be anger, hatred, sadness, disappointment. It's okay. You're allowed to feel those things. Feel them. Like that is valid. Whatever you are feeling, it is valid. But just know that this situation, yes, it will, like NF, lifelong diagnosis, not having a cure, it does change your life trajectory a little bit, but it doesn't dictate how you have to live your life. I used to always say, like, my diagnosis doesn't define me, but at the same time, it kind of does, because I'm doing everything possible despite what I have diagnosed. Like, I wouldn't live my life this way if I didn't have this diagnosis. So therefore, it does define me, but I don't let it dictate me in what I do. And I want people to realize, like, don't let these things dictate how you wake up in the morning, how you enjoy hanging out with your friends, how you enjoy something you love. Like, don't let it take that from you, because you can probably still find a way to do it if you really wanted.
Amazing. Well, we will link to your social media and to also the Children's Tumor Foundation, because I know you do, again, a lot of advocacy and fundraising for them. And that's also very important right now with things being as they are in scientific funding, et cetera. So we'll make sure we put that out there. But in the meantime, we're just really grateful to you for sharing with us, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story and be sharing all of this. Thank you.
Thanks again to Leanna for joining us, and to our sponsor, Lever Movement, for joining us for a second season as our exclusive sponsor. They are making the show possible, and we hope they help make running more possible for you too. Thanks also to Jeremy Nessel for editing every single episode of the Injured Athletes Club, and thanks to you, our listeners and club members. You can listen to the show on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, or just about anywhere else you get your podcasts. And remember, we alternate these guest interviews with listener questions that Coach Carrie answers. So if you have a question for Coach Carrie, email it to us at hello@injuredathletesclub.com, and she may answer it on an upcoming episode of the pod. Finally, remember that between episodes and anytime you can join our Facebook group, the Injured Athletes Club. You'll find support, advice, and just all around good vibes from other people who just get it. You can get links to that and everything else we mentioned in this episode on our website, injuredathletesclub.com. We'll see you there.